Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Holger, for the introduction. I have the pleasure to give you an inside view on the T2S migration, focusing in particular on how the T2S actors should collaborate in order to ensure a smooth and successful migration. What I would like to emphasize today is that migration to T2S should not be seen only as a bilateral exercise between your institution and T2S, where you have to transfer your business data from your legacy system to T2S, but more as a common exercise where all the involved actors have to work together to reach a common goal and to ensure that we will complete the migration successfully. The main challenge of T2S migration would be that more than 20 markets will be brought together along 4 migration waves. Therefore, this will be rather a complex and difficult exercise in which all T2S stakeholders should be ready and cooperate to make it happen. In terms of the objective of the presentation, first of all, I would like to give you some background information to ensure that the same understanding, you have the same understanding on the activities underpinning the T2S migration. Second objective would be to ensure that each T2S actor understands the different roles that he has to play along the process. On one hand, for its own migration and of course for its community, and on the other hand, he has to play a supporting role for the other T2S actors once he is already migrated T2S. And finally, I would like to give you a better understanding on how the T2S actors will have to collaborate to complete the migration successfully. So let's see how this is reflected in the agenda of today. So the presentation is structured in 2 parts. First part, overview on the migration, where I will give you a short introduction on the background information. Then I will continue with the status on the migration preparation and how do we stand in terms of finalization of the migration deliverables. Then we will see how we are going to ensure the monitoring and coordination of the migration. And in the last part, we will see what are the roles that will be played by different actors and how they will change a role along the way. In the second part of the presentation, I will focus on more concrete examples on the collaborative work in order to have a better understanding on what the collaboration is about. So, where do we stand today? We heard from Catherine that the user testing will start in 3 months from now. If user testing is knocking on the door, I would say the migration is also not very far away. In only 9 months from now, the first activity will be performed on the production environment, of course assuming that the connectivity tests have been successfully on the production environment. And 32 CSDs and central banks will start with the initial setup and maintenance of their relevant static data on the production environment. And in less than a year, T2S will go live, and the first wave of the CSDs and central banks and DCPs will join the platform. Now we will have a closer look on how the migration timeline of the wave will look like. So in this diagram, you can see all the important dates regarding the preparation and execution of the migration wave 1. Some of the dates we already have heard from the previous speakers. So as we can see, we are today on 25th of June, and in less than 1 year, T2S will go live. In the below part of the diagram, we can see all the phases which are defining the pre-migration and execution phase. So we'll start on the 1st of October, the migration testing for wave 1 will start. I hope you all be rested from the summer holiday and ready to start the migration testing, at least the wave 1 participants. And on 21st of March, the pre-migration execution phase, which was already mentioned earlier, of the wave 1 will start. After 3 months, on Friday 19th of June, we will start with the migration weekend of the first wave. And assuming that everything goes well, T2S will go live on Monday on 22nd of June. After which the post-migration phase will start. So now let's have a quick detailed look at the pre-migration phases, the phases which define the migration execution phase. What is the pre-migration phase? So we see that the migration execution phase is divided in 3 phases. First one is the pre-migration phase, during which all the relevant static data which can be uploaded prior to the migration weekend will be already brought to the T2S. Which means, for example, if we take the example of a CSD has to start to set up the parties and the securities account for its clients. And on the central bank side, we already heard from Sylvain that, for example, he has to start to set up the DCA account. In terms of actors, we will have the CSDs, central banks, and their communities, which will be directly or indirectly connected to T2S. Next phase will be the migration weekend, which will start on Friday 6:45 and will continue until Monday morning 5 a.m. So the time available for the migration weekend is quite limited, and there is no possibility for flexibility. During the migration weekend, all the dynamic data has to be uploaded, meaning that CSD has to bring to T2S the position and pending instruction from its legacy system. In terms of actors, we have the same actors already as of pre-migration. The last phase of the migration execution phase will be the post-migration phase, which will start immediately after migration weekend. And the aim of this phase, so-called stabilization phase, is to clean up any migration weekend activities left over, as well as to closely monitor how the T2S is functioning in terms of performance and service level agreement as it was foreseen. In the lower part of the diagram, you can see the starting dates for all of these phases. And for example, yes, they were already mentioned for the wave 1. So now let's see what is the purpose of the migration execution phase and how we will see how the migration is positioned in the context of overall project. As you know already, the migration is the final step before going live, and it will be rather complex, and there is no leeway for improvisation or any maneuver, and therefore intensive testing is required. Therefore, a close cooperation between the testing managers and migration managers is required in order to ensure that all the migration processes are adequately tested and can be performed within the allocated time for the pre-migration and migration weekend. As you can see, migration will take place on 2 test environments, on the migration and community test environments. Another important point that I would like to recall here is that the settlement managers, which are the operational experts, play a very important role during the migration. Take into consideration that all the migration activities are taking place on the production environment, the settlement managers have to be involved from the beginning in the migration test and subsequently in all the migration execution phases. During the actual migration, the settlement managers will jointly monitor with the migration managers all the phases in order to assess any potential impact that might have on the operational environment. So now we will move to the next agenda point, and we will see how do we stand in terms of migration preparation. From the beginning of the preparation phase, the migration subgroup has identified a series of deliverables which were considered as necessary to guide the migration activities. These deliverables are actually defining the framework required for the migration execution. In summary, they address all the processes, activities, steps that need to be executed, as well as the tools that will be available during the migration in order to ensure end-to-end completion of the migration. As many of you are aware, these deliverables were discussed intensively during the MSG meetings that we had in the last year, and we are currently in the final stage of the finalization, at least for the main critical deliverables that are required for the execution of the migration tests. It is important to say that the migration deliverables have been also and are shared with the operational managers group, so the operational colleagues know what is planned during the migration and also to be able to provide any feedback. As a final step, all these migration deliverables will be submitted to the PMG as well as to the steering level for the approval. So what are these migration deliverables? So in this slide, you can see a high-level summary of our main migration deliverables, which are defining the framework for the migration. As you can see, the majority of the documents are in the final stage of completion, and they are ready to be tested. A few words about the different status that we have there. So initial status means that the work is still ongoing. And as you can see, some deliverables are still in the elaboration phase, but we aim that we will manage to finalize this in the course of the following months. The test ready means that we have finalized a baseline version that will be used for the testing. And the final means that this version will be used for the production. And of course, this version will incorporate the lesson learned from the migration testing as well as any results. So now we will continue and we'll have a closer look at the framework which is defining the pre-migration and migration weekend activities. So where do we stand with the most critical pre-migration and migration weekend activities? All the necessary activities that need to be performed during the pre-migration and migration weekend have been already identified by the MSG and have been described in the relevant documents. As you can see here on the right side of the slide, we can see an example of the migration weekend where there is a diagram which describes the overall picture of the migration activities that need to be carried out during the migration weekend. Since it might seem very complex, we don't go into the details. The idea is just to illustrate that we have identified all the activities as well as the dependencies and the sequence of the activities that is required. So once we have identified all the activities, dependencies, the sequence of activities, the next step that we have done, it was to transpose this into a project plan. So we have created a project plan per each wave. So actually now we have 4 project plans for the pre-migration, so-called pre-migration schedules, as well as for migration weekend. These project plans represents actually the scripts that will be followed during the pre-migration schedule and migration weekend phase. In the examples that we will have here is as an example of the pre-migration schedule. You can see that how the schedule looks like and what we are trying to cover, although it's not so visible. We have all the activities description, the code, the actors that will involve, as well as the estimation of this activity. So the estimates of the activities have already been provided by all the involved actors, and now they need to be confirmed and validated during the migration testing execution. As you probably imagine, the main focus at the MSG level was to finalize deliverables for the wave 1, considering that we are so close to the start of the migration testing for wave 1. Another point that it's important to mention here is that, of course, the plans are constantly updated and optimized based on the input that is provided by various actors. So now that the plan is here, what we still need to do is, of course, to test it in order to validate that the plan is feasible and can be achieved in the available time frame that we have for the pre-migration phase, as well as for the migration weekend, which is more critical. So now that we have seen in these examples how many activities do we have to perform during the migration weekend and pre-migration phase, as well as that this involves a series of actors, we have to. The question is how we are going to work. So how we are going to ensure the monitoring and coordination of all these aspects. There are a few elements that should be recalled here. So similar to the program level synchronization points, the monitoring and coordination of the migration phases will be done via the migration synchronization points, which are specific milestones for the migration process. We'll have seen in a few seconds what is the purpose for these migration synchronization points. In terms of who is going to do the monitoring and coordination, each CSD and central bank has to designate a coordinator which is responsible for to monitor and coordinate the migration-related activities, as well as he will be the single point of contact with respect to the communication from and towards the Eurosystem. There will be also a Eurosystem team which is dedicated to the coordination of all the T2S actors, and who will play the role of the coordinator of the coordinators. So now that we know how we are going to do it and who is going to do it, now the question is what are the tools available for this? The main tools which are available in the context of the migration for the monitoring and coordination are the Migration Information Center as well as the Migration Status Reports. So the aim for the Migration Information Center would be to facilitate the monitoring and coordination of the activities by providing timely and up-to-date information on the status and progress of all the actors participating to the migration. What is important to retain here with respect to the Migration Information Center is that the aim of BIC is to provide the CSDs and central banks with the relevant information to allow them to execute their role, and on the other hand, to keep the CSDs and central bank informed on the overall migration progress and how the other actors are with the execution of their task. As regards the migration status report, the aim will be also to monitor and the status as well as the progress of the actors, but also to identify any potential problems that might arise during the pre-migration schedule. Maybe I should mention that the migration status report, which will be used mainly during the pre-migration phase due to the time that will allow, and also will be the basis for taking decision in case things are not necessarily going according to the plan. So now let's say a few words about the migration synchronization points and what is the purpose of them. As I already mentioned, the migration synchronization points are synchronization points specific for the migration. So we have to migrate in a controlled way, and therefore we need these migration synchronization points. The purpose for them is to monitor the progress of all parties and to make sure that all the identified dependencies are resolved at predefined checks points. For example, we cannot start, let's say, the nighttime settlement during the migration weekend without being sure that all the positions and the pending instruction have been loaded and correctly reconciled. Migration synchronization points are also used to reflect the multilateral aspect of the required coordination. So in other words, they serve as a checkpoints to ensure that all the participants have executed and then have completed their task before continuing to the next one. So if we take the same example, which I give it before, let's say that before continuing with the upload of pending instructions, all involved participants have to confirm that synchronization point related to the position creation has been reached. How many synchronization specific points we have during the execution phase, we will see in the next slide. So for each of the migration execution phase, we have specific points which are introduced to monitor the timely execution of the migration. We will have pre-migration synchronization points, migration weekend synchronization points, as well as post-migration synchronization points. Here we have a high-level diagram which gives you an overall picture on how these migration synchronization points will be used. I think during the pre-migration phase, if I'm correct, we have around 1,000 steps to be performed, and therefore the existence of these checkpoints is absolutely required. As you can see, there is a sequence, there is a flow of activities which has to be followed from the pre-migration schedule during the pre-migration weekend, and which will also continue during post-migration phase. And this will be done via these synchronization points. So if everything is more or less clear on how, on the monitoring aspects, I will continue my presentation with the roles that I have to play by different actors and how they will change along the way. So this diagram gives you an idea of the complexity that we are facing in terms of migration to T2S, as I mentioned already before. And as you can see, the complexity is not only triggered by the number of the activities and dependency, but also due to the fact that each actor may have to perform different roles throughout these 4 migration waves. As you can see, the CSDs can play 3 roles. So a CSD can be an SME CSD already from the pre-migration phase of wave 1, when the CSD need to start to set up all the securities reference data for which it is an issuer CSD. Or as a migrating CSD in its own migration wave, when that CSD will start with its security settlement business. And the last role that the CSD may perform is, of course, as an already migrated CSD in the following waves after he already successfully migrated to T2S, where he still has to perform some activities, but this we'll see in a few seconds. According, of course, these roles and the activities that he has to perform in order to, it will be done according to the new configuration. Similarly, on the central bank side, the central bank can also play 3 roles along the process. First, as a system entity, as well as a target 2 system owner. This will be valid for the majority of the central banks that will migrate already as wave 1, as already indicated also by Sylvain. But there will be also some central banks which will offer also the interim solution for the authorization, so therefore they will also play the role of collateral manager. Another role we will play by the central bank is, of course, as migrating central bank, which will offering here the full services. So in addition, he will play the role of the collateral manager as well as a settlement agent. And the last one will be as already migrated central bank, where it will perform business as usual, as mainly to open any additional DCAs upon request of its payment banks. So as you can see in the lower part of the diagram, you can see how many actors are involved and how the landscape is changing for each wave. Let's say it's in principle we have around 30 participants that will migrate each wave, and this number does not include the number of the DCPs. And as regards the DCPs, of course, they also have to adapt, in particular whether there will be DCPs which will play this role and in several markets, then therefore they have to migrate probably with every wave. So now that we spoke a bit about the complexity regarding the different activities, let's see how does it work. So, well, this will work definitely only with the collaboration which is required between different actors. It will be required to collaboration between CSDs and central banks, between SME CSDs and central banks, between different CSDs of waves, as well as CSDs of different waves. Now we will have a look a bit how this will materialize through a series of practical examples that we will see in the following slides. So we will start with the example for the setup of the CMB link. Here, let's say that this diagram shows a bit it's a simplified example, so not all the activities have been reflected, not to scare you. But what we would like to highlight here is that it's a very complex exercise which requires a close collaboration and interaction between a central bank and a CSD. On the left side, you can see the activities to be performed by the central bank, and on the right side, of course, the ones by the CSD. What is important here to recall is that there will be several pre-migration synchronization points that need to be reached by the central bank and CSDs in order to ensure the auto-collateralization or client collateralization. So if we take a concrete example, let's say that Banca d'Italia is a central bank and Monte Titoli is a CSD. So Banca d'Italia has to create its own CSD, which we will confirm then the completion of this task by confirming the PMSP, pre-migration synchronization points. It will be reflected via the Migration Information Center. Based on this information, Monte Titoli, which in the meantime has created the central bank securities account, will link the central bank securities accounts with the cash accounts. Similarly, once the Monte Titoli has completed its task, he has to confirm that he has reached the PMSP and therefore gives the green light to Banca d'Italia to continue its task. So the process will continue in this way until, of course, the final step. As you can see, the last PMSP, it's important, and it's a checkpoint for both of the involved actors. Next, we will have an example between the collaboration between an SME CSD and investor CSD. Here it's a bit simpler exercise. So here we are going to focus on the creation of the securities by an SME CSD to allow the migrating CSD to act as an investor CSD. So let's say that we have Clearstream as an SME CSD and Monte Titoli as an investor CSD. So Clearstream has to set up its securities and afterwards to create the SME Security CSD link. Once these activities have been completed, he will communicate via MIC that he has reached the PMSP, and therefore on his side and so forth, therefore the Monte Titoli can start, is able to create the Investor Security CSD link. The next example will be focus on the setup of the accounts and how the CSDs have to complete the configuration for their accounts in their role as an issuer CSD, respectively as an investor CSD. What is important to highlight here is that this configuration has to be maintained also during the subsequent waves, considering the new investor CSDs will join the platform. So the issuer CSD has to define a party for which he has to set up the omnibus accounts. Afterwards, he has to confirm the PMSP via the MIC. On the side of the investor CSD, the CSD has to create the mirror account, and once the PMSP has been confirmed on the issuer side, we will link the mirror account to the omnibus account via the CSD account link-up setup. So now we will move to the last example, which will be focused on the activities that are required to be performed by the already migrated CSDs. As I already mentioned earlier, also the already migrated CSDs, they still have to perform some activities, even if they already migrated to T2S, in order to reflect the new migration configuration. So in particular, they have to update the cross-CSD leaks configuration. Let's assume that we are in migrating with the wave 2. So let's say that Monte Titoli, which is an already migrated CSD, has to perform some static data updates during the weekend in order to reflect that, for example, Euroclear, which will migrate in wave 2 from the external CSD, will become an internal CSD to T2S. In addition to this activity, there is also some special handling of the pending cross-CSD instruction is required. So in order to reduce the complexity over the weekend, the already migrated CSDs should either refrain from sending such instruction to the platform, or if they are already been sent to the platform, they have to cancel and re-extract them. With this example, I come to an end to my presentation. So I think that the message that we wanted to pass today is quite clear. Every actor plays a key role in the migration process, but the fulfilling of its role has a significant impact on the success of the overall migration. As I already mentioned, we all have to work together, CSDs, central banks, CSDs participants, payment banks, of course, T2S operator, T2 operator, let's say in a big orchestra where everyone has to play its part, but in the same time to play together in order to make it a success. That's it on my side. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. Any questions? Was the diagram too complex to be digested? Okay, we have to admit we started with the most scary one. Yeah. So, but this is also reflecting the point that Sylvain made earlier. As this is quite a complex ping-pong game, especially for this one, we have to pay very close attention, and it's very, very important for all the actors to work hand in hand on this to make it successful and to make it in the time. So there's a question.
Hi, Nicola Riley from Citi. Most of the presentation there was focused on the CSDs and the interaction you see the CSDs having with the ECB over the migration. My question would be in relation to slide 14. You mentioned the migration synchronization points and touching base. How do you foresee the DCP connectors touching base with the ECB? Shall they do that through the CSD, or do we go directly through to the ECB? To T2S.
I will start, and Holger, you can complement. Let's say that the interaction of the DCPs, also during the pre-migration phase and migration weekend, is, I would say, rather limited. So the activities to be performed by the DCPs are to be defined by each individual CSD and central bank, which is responsible for that DCP. In the pre-migration phase, I think it's in terms of DCPs, it's rather limited. We have maybe the client collateralization activities that can be performed by the payment banks if the central bank would allow, maybe the setup of the users and so on. As regards migration weekend, the DCPs will be allowed to let's say to send instructions after the point of no return has been reached.
Okay, so after the point of no return. And just one more question.
To ensure the migration.
Sorry. You mentioned there the auto-collateralization, and from conversations that we have been having with our clients, one of the main benefits that they do see with T2S is having the availability of a DCA with the NCB. How do you suggest we advise our clients to go about setting up that DCA over the migration, or is that another after the point of no return that they can do that?
Well, the DCA setup is, as mentioned before, this is something that is happening during the pre-migration phase. So if you or if your clients want to have a DCA, then they have to approach the central bank of their choice. As we heard, basically they follow more or less the same principles. So they could choose the preferred one, and then they have to basically with this central bank agree on the opening of such an account under the conditions that the central bank is that the euro system in a harmonized way is offering in all those markets for those DCAs. But this is following the same principles. Those DCAs will be set up in the pre-migration phase and will be available as of the Monday after the migration.
Okay, thank you.